You guys ready to chop it up? I'm so excited about our conversation tonight. It's going to be amazing. Oh my gosh. And firstly, I just want to thank all our supporters, all our listeners. You guys are pushing me to be better, to make sure we book the best guests in all of mankind. So I just want to thank you guys so much for your support. And we actually have a contest winner. So congratulations. I got my guest. He's already smiling. I see him smiling.
You said all of mankind. That's like a tough act to follow.
I know that's a tough act to follow. Yes. Well, again, welcome back to Chop It Up, you guys. It's the home of unfiltered conversation, organic. We speak about lifestyle, wellness and all that. So I'm so happy you guys are supporting us, and welcome back. Tonight, we have a great conversation. As you guys know, this new season is all about empowerment in voting, empowerment in leadership, and certainly tonight we are talking about empowerment in terms of financial empowerment, which we need to talk about, especially within communities of color. So, of course, I got the man for the job, you guys. I got y'all. Come on now. I got y'all. Allow me to introduce the amazing, the incredible Greg Bishop. Greg Bishop has a name for himself: investing in low to moderate income communities, growing the capacity of small and medium-sized enterprises, and building a resilient technology infrastructure for media companies. Mr. Bishop has over 13 years of government experience serving under Mayor Michael Bloomberg and Bill de Blasio. From 2015 to 2020, he served as the commissioner of the New York Department of Small Business Services, SBS. They're also known as SBS, where he has been in charge of running a dynamic city agency. During his tenure, he connected small businesses to over, you guys listen to this, to over 200 million in capital. I mean, we need bomb drops for this. 200 million in capital. Certified a record 9,000 minority and women business enterprises, connected over 100,000 New Yorkers, 100,000 New Yorkers to good paying jobs, and invested over 10 million in capacity, building programs across the 5 boroughs. Currently, he is the executive director of the Social Justice Fund, an initiative funded by Joe and Clara Tsai Foundation. The Social Justice Fund centers its work around racial injustice and economic mobility for Black and Indigenous people of color, right here in the Brooklyn area.
BK.
Mr. Bishop, yes. Welcome to Chop It Up. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. I don't know if I could pay you for all the kind words that you just said. I'm pulling out my checkbook right now, and I'm like,
you better.
It's like, which account am I going to write this check from?
Write it out to Chop It Up.
No, thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. As I'm researching your background, it's so amazing and it's so full circle. I wanted to share this with you because I am in New York and I do have a small business. And a few years ago, when I first started, I really wanted to get it cracking. Like, I wanted to get those type of contracts.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So I'm the person, like, if I don't know where the information is, I'm going to go out and seek it. Like, that's literally how I've been through college, high school. It's crazy. But nonetheless, so I visited the SBS location in Manhattan, and I was asking questions. I was like, who I need to speak to, because I need to be active. And but I didn't get to meet you at that time. You were super busy.
Yeah.
But it's really full circle now that you're on this platform that I created.
You know,
Boss.
I just love your drive and energy and you know, a lot of people don't understand entrepreneurship. A lot of the secret ingredient is what you just talked about, right? It's determination. It's you know, it's putting in the effort to do the research. It's, you know, not taking no for an answer, right? It's literally, you know, if a door closes, okay, well, let me get to the next door and figure out how I could, you know. So definitely kudos to you for all the work that you're doing and for having this platform, right? You know, one of the reasons why I thought it would be great for me to be on here is because I know there's different ways of connecting to our community. You have a viewership, a listenership that appreciates the rawness and the realness of this conversation.
Yes.
And therefore, it's important for me to be here to talk about the work that we're doing with the Social Justice Fund to empower our Black businesses and our BIPOC businesses, because that is, you know, information. I'm glad you said it. Information is one of those things that when you are, especially in our community, we may not know certain things. And when I was commissioner, that was one of the things I was adamant about in terms of like, how can we get to the communities that really need our services? Because most of these services are at no cost, right? And, you know, so we tried different ways of getting, you know, obviously you do the normal, like the papers, right? The Daily News, the New York Times, et cetera. But then you do you do a podcast, right? You do the Breakfast Club, you do like other ways of like really connecting to the community. So great job.
Thank you so much. No, that's so amazing. And that's a really good segue into our conversation about connecting entrepreneurs to resources, to investors, to lenders, because that's big right now, especially with the movement from last year to 2020, and we're coming out of the pandemic. So I kind of wanted to ask you with that in terms of, before we jump right into it, who is Greg Bishop?
Oh, wow. You know, I was, you know, actually, to be honest with you, Greg Bishop, who is Greg Bishop? I'm an immigrant. So I picture myself like the 17-year-old Greg Bishop that grew up in East Flatbush, right? You know, we have all the similar stories. You know, my mom came up here, you know, left me with my grandmother. So that I know there's a lot of individuals who have the same stories, right? Your parents left you with an aunt, an uncle, a grandparent, came to this country for what? The opportunity, right? It's all about opportunity. And in my case, I was blessed, right, that my mom became a nurse. You know, she was a nanny for a while she put herself to school. But when she graduated from New York City Tech, CUNY is also very important to this conversation. She became a nurse and worked at downstate for over 30 something years. But during that time, you know, she worked 2 jobs downstate in a nursing home to put me through school. And I was fortunate enough. I went to a private school in elementary and middle school, but then I went to Brooklyn Tech for high school. So I am the person you see here today, and the resume that you read off is a product of some hardworking, strong Black women, right? Because I will say that my grandmother was an entrepreneur, and she built the first concrete house in our neighborhood, right, in our village. And if you're from the Caribbean, you understand like wealth is determined by like what materials your homes are made of, right? And so when we had our concrete house, that was and indoor plumbing, right? So
yeah, I was rich.
You know, we didn't have the latrine, you know what I mean? Like we had indoor plumbing. You know? So I was styling when I was a kid, you know? So I mean, we didn't have a phone, we didn't have a TV, but we definitely had indoor plumbing. So I am a product of you know, of strong Black women. You know, I am a person who is very dedicated to giving back because I recognize the you know, the privilege that I had, but for the grace of God, right, that yes, I've had the opportunity, and I will keep on coming back to that word, the opportunity, because many times when we talk about economic mobility, and that's some of the work that we're doing with the Social Justice Fund, it's all about opportunity. And when you think about this country and you think about the opportunities that were afforded to some people, unfortunately, we have systems that actually robbed specific groups from that opportunity. And I will talk about systemic racism and how it impacted the Black community, right? When you think about like Seneca Village, and for those who don't know about Seneca Village, you know, when you go to Central Park, like part of Central Park was a thriving Black community, right? Can you imagine if that Black community was still around now with the real estate values that it is? Like literally that family and the generational wealth that was going to be created from the individuals that own that land, we probably would have multimillionaires in New York City, right? And when you think about, you know, multimillionaires who are coming from, you know, sort of the same communities that we're coming from, they're reinvesting, right? They're mentoring, they're doing a number of things, right? When you think about our interstate system, you could look at Robert Moses, and I would encourage your readers to be civically engaged by reading The Power Broker. You know, Robert Moses built, you know, the BQE, the Gowanus Expressway, you know, all these highways that we drive on, but they were Black communities that were there before, right? That had to be demolished. And this is a story that's prevalent around, you know, the nation. And what's interesting is you hear these conversations, and I know we're not talking about like, you know, critical race theory, but you hear these conversations about, you know, no one about a movement to stop teaching this stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And I saw it's actually a meme recently where literally, you know, you have individuals who, there's a generation who tried to stop us from going to school. Their kids are now trying to stop like the education system from saying, your parents tried to stop us from going to school, right? That's really what's happening right now. You know, so we have to be really aware of what's happening. And so some of the work that we're doing is really focused on, you know, changing those systemic challenges. So one of the things we did was create the Brooklyn Accelerate Fund. And that is a fund that's focused on helping Black-owned, BIPOC-owned businesses through the pandemic, right? So we know that, you know this, you know, prior to the pandemic, Black businesses were literally hurting, right? Yes. Either through gentrification, high cost of rent, a number of things. And we wanted to make sure that the pandemic didn't wipe out like the Black-owned businesses that even survived that. And so we created this loan program where you can borrow up to $100,000. Literally, all you have to do is prove that you are viable in 2019. We want to make sure you don't have a huge amount of debt, that you can service the loan. And then someone from the community, whether it's a pastor or an imam, will vouch for your character, right? We're not asking for collateral. We're not asking for a guarantor. And those two things are systemic issues, barriers that prevent individuals from getting the capital that they need.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And that's exactly what we need to hear, especially as we're talking about financial empowerment. So talk more about that. What are some steps that a business, you know, owner or a young entrepreneur can do to get ready to accept something like from a lender such as yourself? Yeah. What are some steps or preparation?
So I think that, you know, the major thing right now is, and we're right now we're focused on businesses that were in existence that were impacted by COVID. But we are part of the work that I'm doing, and you know, soon in quarter one of 2022, you're going to hear more from us in terms of how do we help that young entrepreneur? How do we help that person that has a business plan that wants to start a business? You know, I'm sure your listeners understand like the work that you have done in terms of starting your business, the capital that you had to put. Most business owners, and especially in communities of color, you're bootstrapping your business, right? There's no aunt, there's no uncle, there's no grandmother, there's no grandfather that's just going to lend you $50,000, right? And if they do, it's like, you better not lose that money because I worked really hard for that, right?
I took that out of my susu.
So I'm glad you said that, because I'll talk a little bit about the program, but literally, you know, what typically happens is you use your credit card, right?
Yeah.
You use savings, right? And what people don't realize, especially, you know, when you look at like some of the challenges, Black women have the most student loan debt, and therefore they have the biggest problem in actually getting the capital that they need, right? And so what we are doing is trying to figure out like how to help new entrepreneurs. But for the existing program, you have to be in business prior to the pandemic. And literally what we're doing, and it's a loan program because we want to make sure that this money, it's a $2.5 million investment out of like literally the social justice fund is a $50 million commitment over the next 10 years to address racial justice and economic mobility issues in Brooklyn. And so the first out of the gate was how do we help businesses with that's impacted by COVID? And what individuals, they can go to bksjf.org. So that's Brooklyn Social Justice Fund. So bksjf.org. They can click on the link for the Brooklyn Accelerate loan program and fill out the information. And what it is literally you can borrow up to $100,000. So up to $15,000 is a 0% interest. Up to from $15,000 to $100,000 is a 2% interest rate. So that's even cheaper than the federal government and their emergency programs. And we have 3-year terms. In certain cases, we can go a little bit more, but it's usually 3-year terms. And literally what we're doing is we're trying to help businesses that can't get capital from nowhere else. Because what we're trying to do is disrupt the financial markets by saying like, look, you're evaluating risk using some criteria that have embedded systemic racism in it, right? In order to evaluate risk, you want to see collateral, you want to see guarantor. Well, guess what? Because of redlining, a lot of us couldn't own property, right? And that's where the collateral comes from, because of what I just talked about in terms of when you talk about, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Greenwood, you talk about Seneca Village, there are so many things that impacted our ability to actually have wealth through owning property. So because you're asking for that, what you're doing is you're perpetrating that like systemic racism. So we're pushing the boundaries on how do you evaluate risk. And what we're saying is, wait a minute, the community can actually evaluate risk for you. Because if you have a pastor, an imam that says like, I know Greg Bishop and I know his business and I know his character, and I will tell you that he will repay this loan. Guaranteed, I will probably pay that loan faster than Fannie Mae or any of the others because it's my pastor, right? I don't want to, and so we also wanted, so what we're testing is community accountability and how that plays into the repayment terms, right? So if you have a credit score, basically what we're saying is if you have a character reference from someone that you trust, someone that trusts you, that's the equivalent of having an 800 credit score. The other thing we're doing is actually, the reason why we decided to make it a loan is because we want to keep that money circulating within the community. So when you mentioned Susu, that's exactly what we're trying to do. So when I repaid a loan, I now can vouch for someone else and they can get access to that money, right? And that money just keeps recirculating and recirculating, right? And so we want to make sure that the community supports the businesses that are getting our loans, because that's how they're going to increase their sales, and that's how they're going to be able to, repay. And we will just continue recirculating and recirculating and recirculating. So that's the innovation that we're building out, and that's what we will continue to do in everything. When we're looking at capital, access to capital for new entrepreneurs, we're going to try to be innovative. When we look at under racial justice, and we look at our education system, our criminal justice system, our healthcare system, we are going to try to disrupt systems to make real impact, and therefore, using the influence that Clara Usai has. She's one of the co-owners of the Nets and Liberty, to then say, hey, this is what we did in Brooklyn. So, federal government, other NBA owners, if you want to make an impact in your community, here is how you can do it.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. I hope you guys are taking notes. I'm taking notes, Mr. Bishop. Like, so far I heard credibility, which is a big factor. Mm-hmm. I heard investment up to 100,000 at a 2% rate, interest rate. I heard definitely being in business prior to the pandemic, because we have a lot of folks, as you know, that all of a sudden they're in business,
and guess what? They're all about to go to jail.
Yeah, right.
That's the one thing about government is they never forget. So, 10 years from now, we're going to be hearing about people who
And it's
defrauded the
happening.
system.
We're hearing it on the news, celebrities,
I know.
influencers, like everybody is
Yeah.
scamming.
It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate
It is.
because now the system, if another pandemic happens, there's going to be tighter controls, and it's going to affect who? You, right?
You.
The small business owner who really, really desperately need the cash. But what we're also saying, though, is take that lesson, though. If you notice, capital was just flowing freely, right?
Yes.
There wasn't really much,
Regulations.
right. And you could tell that there are people who desperately needed it, got it, and actually did really well. So some of the work that we're doing in terms of measuring and evaluating, saying like, hey, SBA, maybe you should actually commit, whether it's, $1 billion, $5 billion. I mean, these numbers sound large, but when you're talking about an entire country, it's actually pretty small, to encourage entrepreneurship. And the reason why you should do that is when people are actually building their businesses, right? What are they doing? Small businesses hire within their communities, right?
That's right.
If I start a business in East Flatbush, I'm probably going to hire a kid, Greg Bishop, who's 17, to actually do odds and ends in my business. Guess what? Now Greg Bishop is off the street, right? Now I'm busy with this business that I'm working in, and I feel good because I'm earning an income and I'm getting the experience and exposure to then maybe I can be an entrepreneur, right? So that changes. So there's another conversation that needs to happen. Instead of spending $1 billion with the NYPD to fight crime, maybe we spend $1 billion to encourage entrepreneurship to prevent crime, right?
Yes.
That is like sort of like when you talk about disrupting the systems, that's what we're trying to do.
That is amazing. I love how you said that. It's reevaluating the money and putting it somewhere else. Right. Are you pro defund the police, or are you like on the borderline?
So here's what I'll say, right? If you are a consumer, you're not going to shop in an area that's not safe, right? So certainly we need safety. And I grew up in New York City, but in the 80s, I remember New York City in the 80s, right? You couldn't actually, ride the subway without riding in the middle of the car, right? The reason why the guardian angels exists was because the police department couldn't keep up with the crime, et cetera, et cetera. Right. So business need safety. What I am about is just a reevaluation of priorities, right? So when you look at in New York City, right, and I always put out the numbers, the agency that's responsible for helping entrepreneurs build their businesses, the agency that is responsible for training people to find jobs, right, to actually employ them, their budget is about $100 million, right? The agency that's responsible for safety and security, their budget is $6 billion, right? Wow. So if you notice the disparity there, right?
Yes.
So why are we not encouraging more entrepreneurs to start businesses, right? Because if you have those businesses in communities, underserved communities, they're going to employ naturally the young people in those businesses, right? And young people need something to keep them busy, right? And I was a summer youth kid, right? So that was one of my first jobs that gave me the exposure. Outside of summer youth, my first job was at the Brooklyn Public Library. That's an anchor institution, and so those are the things that we need to be doing in terms of encouraging, businesses to grow in the city. Therefore, you don't need to worry about investing so much with the NYPD or safety, because you've got so much activity happening in terms of new businesses starting, in terms of workforce, in terms of people getting hired, in terms of like, if you have all these new businesses, guess what? During the summer, all these kids have places to go, right? In terms of summer youth, right? So that is my answer, which is a long way of saying that I'm all about prioritizing the money where you can use it most effectively.
Yes. No, I love that. And it's funny you said that. Well, it's thought-provoking that you said that, because I guess prior to our conversation, we were talking about that there are a certain amount of people at the top that really controls some of the issues that pertain to, like gang violence, gun violence, some of the issues that's plaguing us in the community. And they know that it works in their favor if they sit back and do nothing. But here they have you, who might be a part of the 1% or a percentage, a minute percentage that actually wants to see things change and is actively making a change and a difference. So that's amazing.
There's a lot of folks out there who are trying to disrupt the system, right? And
Yes.
I think your listeners need to know that when we talk about the system, we're talking about systemic issues. And,
Yes.
and I would encourage your listeners to be a student of history, right? If you don't know your history, you're doomed to repeat it, right? And I always encourage people, like, literally understand how this nation was built, understand some of the challenges that this nation has. I think this nation needs to have a reckoning in terms of like understanding, like, okay, this is what we did, right? There was slavery, right? Then there was sharecropping, right? Then there was Jim Crow, right? And like there's civil rights. So literally, when we think about the history of this country, you know, you can go back to the 70s. There are people who are still alive who remember, I could not go here because I was Black, right? That is the fundamental problem that we have, is that we don't want to address our history to then look forward to our future, right? And so there are people, there are either individual, philanthropic, individuals like Clara Lusai, who's very big on social justice. There are foundations that are focused on disrupting the system, and there are elected officials, right? So you cannot operate in a vacuum. You have to be educated. And we started this conversation when you were talking about doing your research. You've got to do your research, right?
Absolutely.
It's great as an entrepreneur for you to say, I want to start a business, but do your research in terms of like, what programs are available? What type of business should I start? What support do I have? How am I going to get the community to support it? And then there's going to be programs like us, and we work through the Brooklyn Chamber, and they provide you a whole bunch of other supports.
Awesome. Before you run off really quickly, because we are now part of the Daily Gospel Network, how imperative has your faith been in balancing your life and your career? How imperative has your faith been in balancing?
When I tell you, it has been absolutely imperative. And I always say that I am blessed, right? And I will tell you, so I grew up in the church, and my mom is a pastor. But I think, when I talk about my blessings, so number one, I leave everything up to God, right? And I never say like, I made it here by myself, right? I say my steps are ordered by God, right? And God has just used people to open up doors for me. And so that has been number one in my life. Like I literally leave everything up to him, which is probably why like I always seem very laid back, because it's easy for me to say, you know what, God, you take care of it. Right. And you do not believe how that just the stress just leaves, right? Because you just know like his will be done. And if I'm supposed to get this opportunity, I'll get it. If not, there's something better that's waiting for me.
That's amazing. We want to thank you so much. You're so
Thank you
inspirational.
so much.
Thank you
very much. Keep on doing the great work that you're doing. And
awesome.
let's talk in 2022 when I have a new program to pitch. For your listeners to really take advantage of as well.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Greg. It's a pleasure. Be
All
well.
Right.
Thank you.
Take care.
You guys, make sure you follow this episode. Make sure you like and subscribe to the Chop It Up podcast. We'll see you on the next episode, you guys. Bye.
Take care.
Bye.